where we as House of Analytics. So if you guys haven't been through our talks on Tuesday's webinar before, welcome. Thank you for joining tonight. Before we start, I would like, on behalf of House of Analytics, I would like to introduce ourselves first. So what is House of Analytics? House of Analytics is a consultancy. We are based in Jakarta. We help companies understand their problem and give them innovative recommendations to move forward. So we usually use experiential method to solve problems where we combine data and also field observations to provide better and also faster decision. So through this sharing session, which is talks on Tuesdays, our aim is to promote the discipline of decision science, where we extract insights from data to make decisions and make innovations forward. So thank you very much for those of you who just joined the session tonight. We really appreciate your enthusiasm. And over the course of our journey, which is about 2 years, we have covered several industries so far, from financials, also transportation, education, and also healthcare. So if you guys have been through our webinar last week, we talked about healthcare analytics, and you can see all of the webinars that we had before in our YouTube channel on House of Analytics. Okay, so moving on, I would like to introduce the panelists for tonight. 3 panelists for tonight, Sean, and then me, Tasha, and also Sarah. So I would like to ask my panelists. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Tasha.
Hi, would you be able? I'm good. How are you tonight?
Good as well.
Okay, are you able to introduce a bit about yourself?
Yep. So thank you everyone for joining our session tonight, where we'll be talking about the transformation and the process of it, as well as how to assess it. My name is Sean Taher. I'm one of the co-founder of House of Analytics together with Tasha. And so again, Tasha. And a lot of my background is in consulting as well as in business analytics and financial analytics, where our my main experience is usually in banking as well as in manufacturing. And so just enjoy the show for tonight. And yeah.
Thank you very much, Sean. So everyone, my name is Anastasia. You can call me Tasha. Same with Sean, my experience mostly is in consultancy, where my main strength is on human capital analytics. So it's where we gather data related to people, which is HR, performance, and we take insights from those data, make it into a recommendation to make decisions related to people. And those are the things that we will also talk about today, how we are able to make insights from the perspective of people. So I hope that tonight you will gain insights and also new knowledge related to people decisioning. So I would like to ask one of my panelists. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Tasha.
Would you be able to give a brief introduction about yourself and your background?
Okay, so my name is Sarah. I graduated from a major that has relation to analytics, but maybe not obvious as you think. But however, along my journey, I feel that using data and analytics is actually very, very important in terms to make decision and to not only to make decision, but also to make it faster and have higher quality.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So, what to expect from this session tonight? These are the things that will be uh, expected and the things that we will not cover. So, what to expect? There are three. Number one, what you will learn about the contextual background of on the objective of course transformation. Number two, how to assess it from the perspective of employee. Number three, the case study which we actually have done related to uh, people analytics and also organization impact through culture and leadership. What not to expect? Number one, we won't talk about the tools of measurement and about culture and leadership. We won't deep dive into that. Number two, we also won't be deep diving about the guidance on how to do transformation, what to do about transformation in an organization. Number three, we're not also going to talk about benchmarking transformation and organization impact on different companies. Okay, so if you guys are interested to have an e-certificate of recognition of participation, please contact us through info at House of Analytics so that we will be able to guide you through some of the details. If you are interested to build your credentials with us, please contact us through info at houseofanalytics.com. So we will be talking right now about the main subject, which is assessing organization impact through culture and also leadership. So, Sean, would you be able to share, right? In terms of assessing organization, they usually want to do transformation, right? In the context of assessing their organization, usually they have three things that uh, they assess, which is organization, customer, and also employee, right? Would you be able to give a brief context on this, right? On the types of transformation and why we want to focus that on the people.
Okay. So whenever we talk about transformation companies, for example, a lot of people always talk about digital transformation, and then you have a lot of technological transformation, HR transformation, cultural transformation. Um, we always talk about how the company is changing its working style, tries to innovate in new products, or even tries to use and adopt new technologies that they use. So when it comes to transformation, a lot of the times they always focus on the whole organization, as well as how the customer, how do you interact with the customer. I think one example can be how banking, for example, before maybe it was with tellers, right? Where we usually do banking with the tellers. We go to the branch, we apply our credit card and all those things in the branch. But nowadays, a lot of the things can be automated, and the transactions can be done through the phone or even through the laptop, right, or PC. But when we talk about transformation, we usually forget about the employee side, where we talk about how about our employees, our people, uh, and that's because when it comes to evolving in markets as a company, you also have to remember that our employees and people have to evolve, where it's not just about the skills and capabilities that has to evolve, right? Uh, but it's also in the mindset on how they make decision, the leadership, as well as how the people in the company interacts with each other, and especially how they um, make decisions, not only just based on intuitive thinking, but also has to be based on data, right? A lot of things has to be automated, and it's almost like changing a lot of habits, which in our experience tends to be the most difficult case, because when it comes to changing habits, it's very difficult. And so that's why today we're going to talk a lot more on how do we measure uh, impact when it comes to transformation in terms of the employees. So we're going to talk a lot about cultural transformation. We're going to talk about how the leadership of our employees as well as our people is done. So we're going to talk more on the HR side. So if you go to the next page, we're going to look at two different assessment when it comes to assessing the impact of transformation. The first one is going to be cultural assessment, and the second one is going to be a leadership assessment. As you can see in the cultural assessment, we have work value assessment, attitude assessment, employee lifecycle assessment, and other assessments. And in the leadership assessment, in terms of impact, we're going to look at how the decision complexity, job complexity, risk in making wrong decision, and other assessments. And when we look at the impact in terms of the transformation, we look at it from an individual perspective as well. So these assessments are going to be done in terms of the individual level in our employees or our people in the company, where it will then be transformed into a measure of impact, where we would know whether our workforce has actually transformed or it's still staying the same. And why we picked these assessments is because instead of just looking at performance, business performance, right, looking into the revenue, profit, or even the number of customers that we have gained, the growth, it's more to do looking into the mindset and the changes in terms of how uh, the way of thinking, right, the culture, and how mentorship is done as well, because ultimately we can't just evolve in terms of our products or even innovate in terms of our what we sell, but also have to innovate in terms of how we think and in terms of how we evolve. So that's why today we're going to look at how the culture and leadership assessment is going to be a good measure for impact. So first, we're going to look at cultural assessment. And Sarah, would you like to take over this part?
Sure. So here, after Sean just explained about how does culture and leadership have impact in organization. So when we take a look at culture, sometimes you only think that, oh, culture is something that the company already has from the very beginning, or culture is something that is there because of the country. So of course the country in if the same company in Japan will be different even though it's the same company in Indonesia. But actually, culture is determined by the people inside. And we will go through that after this slide. There are multiple types of culture. In general, there are four. These four are decided based on some aspects such as the stability, order, and control, or external focus, or whether the company is flexible or not, or the internal focus on the integration and unity. So it depends on the company purpose or how the company tries to do their business, day-to-day business. For example, the culture of people who works in Google or the company culture of Google, Apple, obviously will be different than those who works or company who are banks. And of course, it will also be different than airlines company or public service or government or ministry. Of course, everything will be different. So there are four main cultures. The first one is the create culture. So if you see the orange box here that says create, it means that the culture promotes, or usually the people there, the objective of the company is to create something new. This culture is possessed by a company like Google or Apple or Microsoft, that needs you or needs the employee to keep creating something new. There is also a culture called compete, where maybe it's not creating something new, but everyone is competing with each other. So not only the company is competing with the rival company, but also the employees are competing with each other. For example, this happens in banks or insurance company, particularly like private insurance company or insurance or bank from uh, Europe or from America. The third culture is the control culture. So it's totally the opposite of the create. If the create company or the company who has create culture allows you to create as many things as possible, to be creative, to do whatever you want in the company, the control is the opposite. The company with control culture needs you to be strict and needs you to follow the guidelines. This usually possessed by a company whose day-to-day basis is to maintain the order, such as airlines. Of course, if you are a pilot or if you are a stewardess, it's impossible for you to create something new because, well, the passenger's safety is at risk. You need to follow from step 1 to step 100. You cannot, I just want to do the step 3 and 5. I don't want to do the rest. And the last culture is collaborate. So collaborate here is a little, it's a little combination of control, but they also still have some flexibility. So in collaborate, the company are very, very open in terms of teamwork. So everything you do needs to be done for the sake of the team. If the team achieves, then you will achieve. There is no individual achievement. It's individual achievement is not put in a very high regards compared to the compete culture. So the collaborate is more about teamwork, teamwork, and teamwork. These are usually used by the company who are who has conglomeracy, who has conglomerate background. So for example, it's a family business. Like the whole BOD, the whole leaders in the company are basically the people from the same family or the people from the same background. Maybe they're alma mater in the same school or alumni and so on and so forth. Usually, government-owned organization or ministry or what we call as public servants, for example, usually have the collaborate culture because they really wants to do teamwork with each other. They don't want any competition between the employee. What you have to bear in mind is that companies have two attributes. The first one is dominant culture. This is the type of culture that if you see or if you join the company for 1 week or 2 weeks, you already know what is the company value. Oh, I already know that this company really values teamwork. Or I already know this company really values the individual achievement, or they want me to create as much things as possible. And the second one is subdominant culture. This is also important, but sometimes it takes time for you to understand what is the subdominant culture. If I want to fit in this company, then what do I have to do? What are the things that are also valuable, but maybe not number 1? Maybe it's number 2 and 3. So, for example, if we want to take a look at a government-owned bank, the number 1 culture, the dominant culture is compete because they want to win against all the rival, and then everyone is pushed to achieve their best. Everyone is pushed to achieve their target. But then when we take a look at the inside, we see that, oh, the people here needs to follow tons of SOP. They have to work based on SOP. That means that the subdominant culture is also control. Then, after we take a look at 4 types of culture, how do we decide on culture? How do we determine whether this company have control or compete or maybe 2 cultures? So, how to determine the culture is not based on the company itself, but it's based on the employee or the people working there. By measuring the employee behavior and their motivation to work, we could define the company culture that is currently operates in. That's why it might be different even if it's the same company. So if the same company have branch, the same bank have branch in Jakarta and in Bandung, for example, maybe the core of the company is the same. Their mission, their vision is the same. But when we go there and then we take a look at their assessment individually, we want to see at the culture in Jakarta branch and the culture in Bandung branch, it will be different because of the people working there is different. Significant attributes may also depend on based on the company. Even if the company are both in control culture, but then the significant attributes or the personality or the characteristic of the employee would be different. Even though both of them have the control culture, maybe the first company, the characteristic is more about 100% following the SOP. And number two is that whatever it takes, they have to follow the SOP. While the other company, even though it's also 100% following the SOP, but they apply some other system that will make them have punishment if they don't follow the SOP. So basically, even if it's the same culture, it might differ depending on the company.
So, Sarah, if you can share about this case study that we've done a couple of months back, right?
Yes, correct.
We gathered the employee life cycle, the attitude assessment, work values assessment, and we found that there are significant attributes based on this assessment.
Yes, correct.
If we go back to the four culture, right? How do we determine the dominant and also subdominant culture based on this assessment?
Okay, so if we take a look at the yellow chart and that says attitude assessment here, let's say this is one company. So we take a look at these three charts as one company, but we have three different assessments. The first one is the employee life cycle assessment, the green one. The orange one, which is work value assessment or their motivation to work. What is their motivation? Number one motivation to work. Why do they want to go to work? Why do they want to work in this company? And then the yellow one is attitude assessment or the personality or characteristic of the employee. The highlighted one or the ones in the box are the top three attributes. So for example, if we test the employee for 60 attributes, we see that there are usually we only take 3 to 5 attributes that has very high points. So out of 100, maybe 80 has the same attributes for something like that. So the highest populated attributes. If we take a look at the yellow chart, it says three things. The highest attribute is creativity. The second one is open-mindedness, and the third one is persuasion. Creativity is the characteristic of the people here is very creative. They like to create something. They are willing to create something. The second one is open-mindedness, which is allowing them to be open to others' perspective or to receive critics and then to apply or to receive other people's idea. And then the persuasion. Apart from being creative, they can accept critic. They can also persuade people to follow them. These three are actually a strong characteristic of create culture. So here, based on the attitude, we can see that the dominant culture of this company is create because the people, mostly the people who works there is have creativity, open-mindedness, and persuasion personality. But then, what about the employee life cycle assessment? And then what about the work value assessment? If we take a look at the green one, we see that a lot of people want to stay there because, I feel good about the compensation and benefit. I think it suits me. And then they're also being rewarded. And recognized by their leaders, and they feel that they have career development. Here, even though maybe we're not really sure yet, we can see that, the people here actually have a very good vision. They want to understand and they want to have a clear view of what they're going to do in the future. And also the work value assessment confirms it that they want to get more pay, but also they want to achieve more and they want to explore about their new options. This shows that this company have the dominant culture of create and the subdominant culture of compete. It means that the people here, they are willing to create something. They are very open-minded, but at the same time, they also want to compete with each other. They don't mind being in a competition with each other. This kind of company usually happens in startup, where people there, especially startup that works in a fintech company. Why? Because the people there are pushed to create something new, are pushed to generate new ideas, but at the same time, they also have to achieve their individual target.
Interesting. So, of course, this is an example from one of the financial industries that we have looked into a couple of months ago, and we found out that they actually have the dominant culture to create, and also the subdominant culture to compete. Right?
That's correct. But at the same time, we also have to remember that we cannot generalize everything. This is the case that we found in a fintech company, but of course it might be different in different fintech company.
Okay, understand. So it's important to contextualize uh, the things that we are going to assess, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so we've talked about culture, and now we want to be able to talk about leadership, right? Once we know that those are the type of culture that we have in our institution or in our organization, the second thing that we need to also understand, if we, let's say we want to do transformation, right? We have to be able to choose the right leader to be able to help the transformation move forward. If we don't choose the right people, then we cannot actually do a full transformation. We don't have the agents of change who can persuade people, who can bridge the people together to say that, hey, we have to be able to have a common goal here, right? And that's why we put leadership as the second component that is very, very important. And the things that we want to see here are three things, right? Decision complexity, job complexity, and risk in making wrong decision. So we will cover more on these three things next. But to give a brief view of why these three things, right? Of course, in your organization, it can be different. The thing about this culture and also leadership assessment for impact is that it can be done through all the tools that you've gathered. It doesn't have to be the same as what we've covered here, but the things that we want to emphasize here is that it has to be contextualized to your organization. And we choose these three things is because for leadership, right? Of course, as a leader, you have to be able to make a better and a faster decision. That's why the decision complexity is the number one assessment that we put. Number two, job complexity. Why job complexity? The thing is that if, let's say, you're a good leader, it means that you've gone through all of the process. You've gone through the initiation, the pain of everything that you've gone through in the activities, in the sense that you've gone through how you perform in the organization. And the more complex your job is, it means that you you are able to have a higher critical thinking and higher problem solving in terms of doing your job, your day-to-day job. Number three, risk in making the wrong decision. Of course, as a leader, you should be able to have a big impact in making wrong decision, right? As a leader, you should be able to have an ownership in what you do and have an ownership of your team. And that's why we put here a risk in making wrong decision. If you have other assessment that you think are more fit to what you're experiencing right now in your organization, please do so. The thing is that um, what we want to emphasize here, it's important to be able to measure it in a clear and in a defined way. So we're going to talk about these three things, right? Decision complexity, job complexity, and risk in making wrong decision. How are we able to measure these? From the perspective of decision complexity, it's about making decision or receiving decision, right? So if let's say you're a leader in an organization, we would expect that you have more decision making capability rather than decision taking capability. And the way that we can measure this is by taking a look, right? If let's say you have more than 70% decision making in your day-to-day job, then we can say that you have high decision complexity. Number two, about job complexity. So job complexity is where we ask whether the leader on their day-to-day job, are they more following the procedure or creating the procedure? It means that, let's say you are in a leadership role, are you more on taking the decision, following the procedures of what has been um, done so far, or you are able to have that empowerment to create those procedures? So if let's say you have more than 70% of the activities listed in the SOP, then we can say that the job complexity is low. If let's say you as a leader have less than 30% activities listed in the SOP, it means that your day-to-day job, it doesn't require following a strict procedure, but it's more on problem solving. Then it means that the job complexity is high because you're faced with ambiguity almost every day. Number three is about a risk in making wrong decision, right? So can the job impact the company severely when making a mistake? It means that as a leader, if you make a mistake, then the risk is very, very high. Let's say the risk in profit and loss is more than 10%, or let's say in employee impact, right? If you make the wrong decision, you will make the employees in the organization attracted. Or let's say if you make the wrong decision, your customers will attract it. So that's why these three things are important, right? So how do we go about measuring this leadership assessment? This is an example that we actually have done also in our previous project, where we take a look at the leaders. It was manager, senior manager and up, and we take a look at their names. We assess them based on the three things, right? Decision, job, and also risk in making a wrong decision. At the end of the day, what we want to see is that whether they are ready to become an agent of change or not. Back again to the organization impact. We want these people to be able to have the capability to persuade other people to transform and to give the message to the people that, hey, we want to be able to transform into a new culture, and this is our responsibility, our ownership. So we take a look at these three things, right? From leader 1 to leader 10. And then we will take a look at these, right? If let's say those three dimensions are low, then they're not ready. If those three dimensions are high, we can say that they are ready. And let's say some of them are medium, some of them are high, then we can say that these leaders have potential, but of course they need improvement, and we are ready to have um, the risk to give them the empowerment as an agent of change. And the thing is that in order for the transformation to happen, that's why the right person has to be chosen. And of course, it has to be back again contextualized to the department and also the job level. So if let's say you're looking for an agent of change and senior manager and up, then we should be able to take a look at those leaders from senior manager and up and see from each of those levels who are potential to become the agent of change. So when we analyze the leadership assessment, particularly in this case study, this is an example that we did on one of the departments, right, on marketing. We analyzed the manager and also the senior manager, and we take a look at those three dimensions, right? Whether the score is high, medium, or low. And we found out actually that the senior managers have low decisioning, low job complexity, and low risk in making decision. And the thing about this assessment is that we can give feedback to the senior management where we can say that actually there's some things that you need to address if you want to do transformation, because in this case the senior managers do not have a good leadership. You have to upscale them, because we can see that in the manager level they are able to have more impact rather than senior managers, right? And so at the end of the day, when the organization wants to do transformation, we need to take a look at number one, the culture, number two, the leadership or the people who will do that transformation. Number one, if let's say we want to see the culture, portray the culture right now, if we go back again to the four culture, if let's say the organization wants to move or shift, right, from collaborate to compete, let's say, then what the organization can do is to map it at first, take a look at the portrait of the current one, and then define, right, what kind of attributes do the organization need in order to move from collaborate and then compete. Then after that, we can map out, right now, if I want to move from collaborate to compete, let's say, who are the people that can help me as an organization to move forward? Then we can take a look at uh, these three things as a leadership assessment of uh, these are the right people that can be upscaled further to help the organization move forward towards transformation, right? So right now, without further ado, I will open the Q&A session, right? So I'm going to open with Sarah first. So Sarah, would you like to see, right? We already have some questions here.
Yes.
Would you like to answer some of the questions here?
Yes,
Actually, there's one question that
this is very interesting actually. This question is asking because in the beginning when I was trying to explain about the culture, I mentioned that sometimes the government culture or the uh, government owned company or like ministry is collaborate. However, the one who asked this question uh, wants to clarify, because based on his experience, the government owned company or the government body is actually full of procedure and hierarchy, and he feels that it's more lenient into control. Okay, so what I want to clarify again here is actually, even though let's say we have 10 government body or 10 government own company, even though it's like that, because the people who is working inside the company, the organization are different people, then it is possible to have different culture. For example, the research organization, what we call here in Indonesia, LIPI. The culture would be different with the other government body, for example, the tax office. Of course, it will be different. Even if it's government-owned banks, it could have different culture. However, most of the times, because it has one head or it has one general or one big circle, sometimes it has similar culture. It might be different. The attributes inside it, the attributes that contributed to the culture might be different, but sometimes it's similar. But we cannot generalize all of this because if we want to take a look at each company and if we want to have more accurate representative of the culture, we should we should deep dive to do data collection, be it using the profile assessment or an interview to confirm our hypothesis on the culture of this company, and it will yield us more accurate result. So
Okay.
for government itself, there might be government that have control culture, Tasha. So for like it's full of hierarchy, you need to follow SOP and so on and so forth. But the subdominant culture or the second culture could be collaborate. Or it's the opposite. The dominant culture is collaborate. They want to do teamwork, they want to do everything together. They value teamwork very much. But also the subdominant culture can be control.
I see. So interesting. It depends. Even if we talk about government, it depends on the line of the industry, right?
Yes,
That's
it
what you
depends on
mean.
the line of the industry as well as the people who work there.
I see. Okay, okay, that's interesting. And when we talk about the subdominant culture, right? Of course, the dominant culture is what the organizations can call as a vision and mission. That's
Mhm.
where they lock.
Yes.
This is the type of culture that we want to have. But in terms of the subdominant culture, right?
Mhm.
Can you elaborate more on that? Because a lot of the research that has come up is that subdominant cultures can change, and how does this go about when we want to do transformation? How does
Okay,
the
so
subdominant culture can help us do transformation and drive the people?
okay, so this is an interesting question. Why? Because subdominant culture are, like you said before, usually even if we only take a look at the vision and mission and we only act as a stranger or a third person, an outsider looking at the company from the outside, we can determine the dominant culture. However, in terms of subdominant culture, sometimes you have to deep dive a little bit more. You have to do interview. You have to talk with the people working there. How do they feel? Uh, how does their performance appraisal being executed every year, and so on and so forth to determine the subdominant culture. In terms of transformation itself, most of the times it will be hard to uh, it's not impossible, but usually it's hard to change the dominant culture 100%, especially if you are the exact opposite. For example, if you are a control, the dominant culture is control, then you want to change to create culture, it will be very, very hard unless you strip everyone down and you change everyone in the company and you change the vision and mission of the company itself. However, if your subdominant culture is actually the new value or the new culture that you want to adapt after transformation, it would be easier. For example, everyone in this company works, the culture of this company is compete. So everyone are competing against each other. But then the subdominant is create. So everyone is competing, but most of them still open to the idea of receiving critics and then throwing idea. They work based on idea. But then the company changed the CEO. CEO wants to be the company to focus more on the creativity part. So they want the company to create something, not only winning the market share, not only having the biggest customer, but the CEO wants to create innovation. They want the customer to feel something new, to do something new. Because the subdominant culture from the very beginning is already created, it would be easier to transform, to switch from the dominant to the subdominant culture. However, if the subdominant culture is created, but then the company wants to switch it to the dominant culture to collaborate, for example, it will be harder. So even though we're not talking about company transformation and giving like tips and tricks and then step by step to do company transformation, if you want to make change in your company, whether you have one or you work in one, it would be best if you take a look at the culture as well in order to determine your next steps and what is your plan to improve your own company.
I see. So in order to do the transformation, right? What actually the company or the organization, the institution can do is that they can actually change the subdominant culture
Yes,
uh, independently, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I see. So if we're talking about a lot of the research is talking about agility in organization.
yes,
Actually,
correct.
this is where we can play. This is where we are able to adapt by
Yeah.
using the subdominant culture to change over time in order
Mhm.
to either follow the market or in order to do the transformation. This is where the organizations can be agile. Is that
Yes,
what you're saying?
yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. And then of course agility can be different because the definition of agility itself is the company or someone who has more agility usually are more adaptable to change. So even though there's storm or wind or whatever coming towards them, it's easier for them to adapt.
I
Then
see.
it will be easier for the company if they want to be more agile in terms of culture to adapt based on their subdominant because the subdominant culture is easier to change. However, if you also want to change the dominant culture, it's not impossible, but it will be harder. So if you want to change the dominant culture, usually it's better to take the subdominant culture and turn it into dominant one.
I see. Okay, interesting. Okay, now I want to ask Sean. So, Sean, do you want to choose some of the questions? We have very interesting questions here. Very interesting.
So I think one person asked about the culture on the hotel industry. Just maybe very quickly on this one, and then we can go to another one. So in terms of the hotel industry, so we usually find in the hospitality industry, so like restaurants, hotel, um, a lot of their culture, they tend to be more into the um, structure, or basically in the, what was it, in the control side, right? As well as in the um, innovate or competitive side. And that's because in terms of food standards, right, or hotels, they usually have a very strong SOP. Of course, if let's say we're talking about like Meridian, right, Sheraton Hotel, or those big hotels that are already chained or franchised, usually they have a very, very strong control culture where their standards have to be 100% following the international or whatever standard that they have, right? Um, but at the same time, they also have a tendency to become more in the competitive or in the innovative side, or in the top right, in the axis, right, of the culture side. And that's because hospitality industry, they have a very fast pace, uh, you know, market where there's always something new in the market when it comes to food, when it comes to hotels, a vacation, right? And we always seek something new, right? And because we always seek something new when it comes to relaxing, when it comes to vacation, when it comes to going out, that's why a lot of the cultures in the hospitality industry is either you are trying to innovate or be competitive, right, at all time, but at the same time they usually have a control side, or a control culture where everything has to be among standard. However, you don't really see it a lot in the family-owned hotels, right, or the small hotels. Usually, that can be more into the collaborative side. Um, but if we're talking about the hotels that are the big ones, usually it's in the control and the innovative side.
Okay, I see. Any other questions that you want to answer, Sean?
So I think Derifaldi. Sorry if I pronounce your name incorrectly, but I think he asked a good question. How should an employee react to a leader or manager having the rate of leader assessment point below high level? Okay, so I think this one is quite a good question because it can be applied for every industry or every company, right? Um, so we had a case on this as well in one of our clients where the leader, right, or the one up, right, or the senior level is more is not as high as the one below, right? So the one that the example that you all see is actually a real case study. And what happened in this particular instance was that um, the manager, right, or the senior manager was mostly doing monitoring work, where he or she was basically ensuring that everything was okay and everything was basically on schedule, or even nothing was going wrong, and they were mostly just looking at whether their um, employees, right, or their team uh, was having any problems or not. But the managers or the employees were basically doing a lot of the decision. At the same time, they were making all of the you know uh, the bulk of the work were actually being done by the employees, and that was because they knew what was going on in the field more so than the senior managers. And that was because the nature of the work that they had basically demanded the employees more so than the managers. Um, and what was interesting in this particular instance was our client basically realized that they knew that the senior managers didn't really know I'm sorry, didn't really uh, contribute a lot, but they were still important as a communication point where the management or the higher management would basically communicate with the senior manager to see what's going on. But when it comes to the performance of the whole overall company, it usually being determined by the employee or the people below the senior managers, because they're the ones who are actually um, making a lot of the decisions or the micro decisions, right, and managing the workforce. Um, and whenever something wrong happens, um, usually the higher management tries to find out who's actually doing wrong, and to find out who, they usually come up to the senior manager first, even though the senior manager isn't really doing a lot of work and isn't really responsible for making the decisions. they still contact the senior manager first to understand what's actually going on. But the company then realized that maybe they don't really need a senior manager because all they do is just monitoring. And maybe instead of contacting the senior manager first, why don't we just cut that position and then go straight to the people below the senior manager, where they're actually the ones that we need to contact, and just go directly connect with them. So I think that was one example that what happened in that particular incident, or example where the employee had a higher leadership assessment than the one above him or her.
I see. So one of the case study that we did was that because the organization wants to move forward towards efficiency, that's why when they analyze this further, it's better to just have a more nimble line of command. That's what you mean, right?
Yep.
One of the decision to just go straight. We don't have to have that
Yep.
role anymore. We can just go straight through.
Yep.
I see.
Yep.
Okay.
It basically makes things simpler.
I see. So I'm going to conclude some of the questions here, because most of the questions here are quite similar. It's about, it's moving towards agility, right? How to create an agile agility culture in the company. And also the second thing is about this one, right? We talk about job complexity here, right? So one of the question about the job complexity is that aren't leaders who's comfortable with procedures will be chosen more as agent of change rather than those who keeps challenging the status quo. I would like to give clarification about the job complexity here, right? It's not about challenging the rules, right? It's about doing the day-to-day job where the leaders here on their day-to-day job, they still follow the rules, the core rules, or we can say the code of conduct of that organization or in that institution. However, when they do their day-to-day job, it's not just about following the code of conduct. Let's say I have to be there at 7 a.m. every day. I have to maintain a good working relationship. I cannot do sexual harassment. That's code of conduct. That's the rules of the organization, right? Of course, those leaders are subjected to that type of procedure. However, in their day-to-day job, when they want to make a decision or when they try to do their daily activities, it's more on handling complexity, ambiguity, uncertainty, because they're not in the role to follow the SOP of their day-to-day job, but they're there to review and also to give suggestions how to make things efficient, how to make things effective. So that's my clarification on job complexity. Number two, I would like to conclude some of the questions here. These are about agility, right? How to create agility in an organization. So I would like to go back to the presentation here that Sarah has mentioned about the four company culture. Right. So we've talked about dominant and subdominant culture. The dominant culture is where the organization needs to have it's what we call an identity of the organization. This is the core, right? Whether you want to collaborate, you want to have an organization that creates, control, or also compete. And this has to be in line with your line of business. For example, if we talk about transportation, why it needs to be controlled here. For example, for Singapore Airlines or for Garuda Indonesia, or for in Indonesia, KAI ya, Kereta Api Indonesia, why it needs to be controlled. Because the line of business prioritize customer safety. And that's why your identity, your dominant culture must be controlled. If, let's say, the company wants to be agile, then the subdominant culture can be can be translated differently. Doesn't have to be the same, right? It can be compete, it can be create, it can be collaborate. For example, in the next 2 to 3 years, the company wants to grab the market. It means that they want to compete, right? Then they can have compete as their subdominant culture. How do these translate to the daily activities? One of the ways that the company can do in order to achieve this is that it can be done through the learning and development, right? So the company can take a look at some of the programs that are related to, let's say, sales, marketing, and also how to be able to grab the market. So the trainings and also all of the learning and development programs can be further improved towards financial activities, towards competing the market. If let's say the company wants to have create subdominant culture, then the programs and also the learning and development curriculum, it should be done related to, let's say, design thinking. And also, let's say we also talk about business design. We also talk about, let's say, think creatively. Those are some of the ways that company uh, are able to have that agility. One of the interesting question here is about an experience. So this particular participant here say that uh, he or she found companies where they move, right, and this participant sees that when they move, they come from the culture that have less hierarchy and everyone can give any input to the company, and it seems that the culture is inconsistent, right? How do this transforms into same style of culture, right? So again, the dominant culture here, or the identity of the company, it must be emphasized further in order so that the person who just joined this company understand, right? There must be an induction program, or where this person, whether this person is fresh hire, or let's say this person is what we call uh, new hires, or uh, those who are recruited in the higher level, they have the same understanding that, okay, as this line of business is moving towards control, then these are the code of conducts that I, as a person who just joined this company, must be subjected to. um, so that's one of the ways where we can understand how we can move as an organization to be more agile, and also how we can have that um, dominant culture as our identity. Okay, so Sean, would you like to add another perspective towards organization impact to culture and to um, leadership before we close this session?
So when it comes to transformation, I think uh, instead of just looking at the revenue, right, cost, or the bottom line, a lot of the times that are underestimated, it's always on the people. I think what we also have to understand is that when it comes to evolving, right, it's not just in terms of the market or in terms of the business model, but it also has to come from the people itself. And it's always been the issue where it comes to whenever we have a set working schedule, right, or whenever we are so used to how things are working, it can be very, very difficult when it comes to changing the mindset and transformation. But what we're here to kind of like give advice as well as kind of a recommendation is that instead of trying to drastically change the culture into, a control culture or a hierarchical culture, and then, a competitive one, I think what a lot of businesses have to realize is that what is the culture that we want to become first, right? But at the same time, we need to measure what are we currently are, right? So that we can understand how can we get there. As you know, if you don't know how to measure, uh, the culture as well as the leadership impact, you wouldn't really know whether you've succeeded or not, right? And in here, what we're trying to do is trying to use all the data and the, available information that we can get, so that we can actually be more informative when it comes to making all these decisions, especially for HR, because it's dealing with people and it can be, one, sensitive, and secondly, it can be very ambiguous. And what we're doing here is to reduce the biasness as well as ambiguity of a lot of these things. So I think that's what, the big message, I think, for human capital analytics, especially for people analytics, for today's theme. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining
Thank
today's.
you. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today's session. Don't worry, the recording as well as the presentation will be sent to you after this session ends. And we would like to give our appreciation for tonight. Thank you very much for joining the session. We hope that you learn new things from the session. We will have another session for next Tuesday, our next sharing on Talks on Tuesdays, which will cover different topics every week, every Tuesday. So stay tuned. We will be giving you our information through our Instagram. And also, if you want to see our previous webinars, you can open YouTube on our channel, which is House of Analytics, to learn more on the topics that we have covered so far. If you have any questions, you can contact us further through these emails, whether through info@houseofanalytics.com, through Sean, through me, Anastasia, or through Sarah, or through our Instagram. If you have any queries, any questions related to decision science, please contact us further. We would love to connect with you. We would love to answer all of your questions. So thank you very much for tonight. We hope that you have a good night, and we hope that you enjoyed the session. Thank you. I stay tuned for next Tuesday. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.